Hi everyone. Today I'm going to read you chapter 12 of Wildmoore Wrath of Zane. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 12. A War to End All Wars. Back at the Shadowy Rock Palace, Maurice and his men were in the main hall when an image from the cauldron appeared. It was Zane. Maurice noticed it and went over to the cauldron, realizing that it was a communication spell. Zane replied to his trusted right-hand warlock. Maurice, it is time. Gather all of the warlocks and meet me at the Wildmoore castle courtyard. Yes, my liege, Maurice said. Time to bring this entire world to its knees, Zane said before the image of himself disappeared, only showing Maurice's own reflection. With this call, Maurice turned to the rest of the warlocks and announced, "All right, men, time to go to the Wildmoore Kingdom and finally take down the girl and make everyone see that we are the ones to rule this world, not the king, queen, and the vermin they call animals." All the men nodded in agreement, grabbing whatever they could use to win this war. Wands, staffs, nets, chains, and small blades made from pitch black charcoal glass. After gathering any kind of weapon the warlocks can get their hands on, they're all finally prepared for the long-awaited war. Maurice, with a sinister smile on his face, replied to his fellow allies, "Let's go kill them all!" But little did Maurice and the other warlocks know, their victory would not be meant. Meanwhile, at the Wildmoore castle, Natalie is getting ready herself, and for the first time since she has been to this world, she finally dresses like one of the forest warriors, but with an entirely different upgrade. She donned a similar brown leathered long-sleeve top, woven grass pants, and brown combat boots, but also donned armored elbow pads made from similar metal as the Forest Knight's armor. Natalie also wore her mother's crystal pendant, the one special piece of her mother that she will finally use to stop Zane and his men once more. Cassius crawled in to see Natalie finally dressed in the proper clothing of the world. Natalie turned to notice Cassius staring, causing the girl to ask, "What?" Cassius let out a sigh and said, "You look more and more like your mother when you're dressed like that." Natalie now has a bittersweet smile on her face and says, "I just wish she's here, not only to help get to know her, but to help me with this war." Cassius crawled closer to the girl and said, "She is here, right in your heart, and she would be more than proud of you for fighting this war. But there is one more thing that you will need for this war." Cassius brought in an emerald green chest and gestured for Natalie to open it. Hesitant but curious, Natalie bent down to open the chest. Inside, it had the most stunning sword Natalie had seen in her life. The sword had a brown leather handle, and the blade was made from rose gold metal, and it was so pristinely clear that Natalie was able to see her own reflection. Cassius explained, "The queen thought you would need this for battle. It is known as the Blade of Gallantry. If your pendant is not enough to stop Zane from destroying our world, this sword might as well. But I can see in your heart that you do not want to kill him, do you?" Natalie looked at the orangutan and said, "Despite everything he had done in the past, he's still a human being. Besides, I have something else planned to throw him off track. And if that doesn't work, then I'll keep the sword on me at all times. Cassius gave the girl a softened look and said with a small grin, "You truly are your mother's daughter." Zane stood right outside the courtyard, and within only a few seconds, Marisa and the rest of the Dark Warlocks showed up as well, with his army finally at his side. Zane is ready to start this war. To further satisfy his desire, Natalie arrived at the courtyard dressed in all the armor she could possess, and the blade of gallantry strapped on her back. Well, well, well. If it isn't the mundane wearing our world's proper clothing for once, Zane said with a mocking tone. You know, you calling me a mundane is really starting to get old, Natalie spat back. Zane just smirked at the remark and took a few steps forward before he shouted, "As the leader of my cult, I demand that you stand down and let me kill you so we can finally rid this world of the filthy vermin as well as the people corrupting what the world would have been." Having enough of his self-entitled speeches, Natalie shouted, "Oh, knock it off with your words of destruction already. You're the only vermin that's trying to destroy this world, not the animals and the people in it. You were doing this out of your own anger and greed. So I am telling you to stand down. You and your men leave this world and never come back to hurt any of these. Never come back to hurt anything any of these people have to hold dear." Zane was angry that this girl was talking back to him, so he snarled, "I don't take demands from a mundane." Natalie did flinch from his yelling, but quickly collected herself. Zane then gave a snide chuckle and said with a smile, you are just like them, believing that love will overpower anything, whether it is love for a loved one or for your beloved. But love is just for the weak, and it ends up making people deplete into anger and madness. Only power can fuel them into their full potential. That love is what will kill them all. Suddenly, Natalie gave him a pitiful look and asked, "Since when is loving your mother a weakness?" Maurice looked at both Zane and Natalie with a confused gaze, so he could see the color drain from Zane's face, as if the warlock had seen a ghost. Zane asked the girl, still maintaining his angered rant, "Where did you hear that lie?" Zane, "It is furthest from a lie. I know everything as to why you were like this. And yes, what your mother had gone through back then was terrible. And my grandfather was to blame for being incredibly superstitious. But my mother had nothing to do with her execution. And you don't have any single right to blame her for the person you became," Natalie said to the warlock. "I have every right to make these people grovel at their knees. You know nothing about losing one that you hold dear. Like I had just said, love is just a weakness that ends up getting someone killed," Zane shouted. Natalie didn't flinch this time, and explained, taking a deep breath, "Don't you dare say I don't know what it's like to lose someone you love. I was only 5 months old when I lost my mother from a car accident in my world. And every day I was taunted and teased every single day by the kids at school that I don't have a mother who loves me. And there were moments where I don't have a mom to celebrate Mother's Day with. But one person was able to make me feel less alone. and help me see that I don't need the power to get ahead in life. My aunt. Your aunt is a fool, Zane interrupted. I'm not done talking. Natalie snapped and continued to explain. My aunt, is the one who kept me fed and enclosed, comforted me from a nightmare in some nights, and loved me every step of the way despite all the hardships we've been through. So no, love isn't what made me weak, heartbroken, and manipulated me into doing something terrible. It made me stronger, opinionated, compassionate, and decide things at my own free will. Zane just laughed at the statement and snarled, Despite all that you have said, you don't have your army to help you stop us. You are all alone, mundane wench. Natalie then gave the warlock a smug grin and said, Am I? Suddenly, a loud roar sounded from the right side of the courtyard, and Tristan lunged out and ran by to Natalie's side. One by one, Forthwin, Tybalt, Thea, Beatrix, Leofric, Modesty, Cassius, Dottie, Thomas, and reluctantly Asher all arrived by the girl's side. With all the animals and her father at her side, Natalie replied, Because I don't seem to be alone anymore. Zane, angered that this was happening, announced, Warlocks, time to attack the wall. With this attack now pursued, Natalie announced, Everyone, let's fight. The war between the Warlocks and Natalie's army soon began to ensue. Natalie wielded her sword and fought against both Zane and Maurice as they tried to weaken with her blast of dark magic. But thanks to the sword given to her by Cassius, Natalie was able to dodge it. Tristan pounced on another warlock and slightly scratched the warlock's chest before growling, This is for what you did to my mother. Forthwin, Tybalt, and Thea all breathed fire at a group of 5 warlocks attempting to use their their magic nets to detain them. Forthwin was happy to be fighting alongside his siblings, because right now, he could no longer live in fear. However, Maurice used a teleportation spell and grabbed Natalie, taking her to a forest clearing so he could finish her off. He pulled out a dagger, the same one he tried to use to slaughter Forthwin, and he snarled, A little mundane rat is going to die today. But the crystal pendant began to glow. So Natalie turned around with her sword in hand, threatening the warlock not to come a step closer. She calmly said to the warlock, Maurice, stand down. I don't want to do something I might regret. Oh, but I won't regret finally killing the likes of you, especially after what happened many years ago, Maurice shouted, about to launch towards Natalie with the dagger. But Natalie shouted, dodging the dagger with her sword, I know about your wife and daughters. Maurice froze in his place when Natalie told him this. He looked as though he had seen a ghost. But this only made him angrier, and he shouted, You know nothing about them. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Look, I know what it's like to lose someone so close to you. And you wanted to do everything in your power to forget it. But no matter how many spells you cast, or how many people you and Zane have murdered, the pain from losing them is still there. And you and I both know that I've never had to blame for their death. Natalie said to the Dark Warlock, seeing the pure rage in his eyes. Maurice wanted to use the dagger to stab the girl right in her skull, but then Natalie said something that made him stop. This isn't what your wife and daughters want for you. Is this how you want to honor their memory? Maurice froze once more. This time, all the color in his face drained out as memories of his wife and daughters. He remembered the day he married his wife at Otter Falls, the birth of his eldest daughter, and his second daughter 5 years later. How he loved to play games he came up with for his daughters to play along, and their final smiles on their faces about 2 days before Zane had attacked Paulwood Village. With all those memories flooding back into his mind, he dropped the dagger, dropped onto his knees, and began to cry, muttering to himself repeatedly, "What have I done? What have I done?" Finally, Natalie saw for herself that the Dark Warlock truly regretted all the horrendous actions he had done, finally free from all the brainwashing Zane had fed him. Now wanting to risk Maurice changing back to a vengeful warlock, Natalie ran back to the kingdom courtyard to see the war still ensuing. Natalie ran with her sword in hand, but only her pendant was able to stop the warlocks from coming near her. One light blast at a time. Meanwhile, Zane was now fighting against Thomas, and despite doing everything in his power to keep the warlock at bay, Thomas was brought to the ground after Zane blasted him down using the net spell to detain him. Zane pulled out a dagger and shouted, "Looks like you will be seeing grace in the afterlife now." But before he could strike Thomas with a deadly dagger, an arrow flew out of nowhere and knocked the dagger out of the warlock's hand. Suddenly, Rolf pounced on Zane with snarling teeth. Ackerley showed up and used his sword to get his colleague out gently and swiftly of the net. Zane pushed Rolf off of him and snarled, "You were all supposed to be locked up in the dungeon." "Not anymore," Ackerley shouted back. Zane looked around, and to his horror, not only the forest knights were freed, but the forest warriors, as well as Madeline and Amelia, had fired their arrows, detaining the warlocks one by one, but that didn't stop him from continuing to fight. Thomas looked down at Rolf before bending to pet his wolf companion and replied, "It is so good to see you, old friend." "And I you, Thomas. Is Barlow safe?" Rolf asked. "Yes, the king and queen are watching over him in the castle, so he is out of harm's way," Thomas assured his wolf companion, earning a sigh of relief from Rolf. Natalie looked over to see the forest warriors firing their arrows, and ran over to Madeline and Amelia before she remarked to them both, "You guys are late?" Amelia shrugged her shoulders and said with a teasing tone, "We were in a bit of a snag." One Dark Warlock charged at the trio before Madeline drew her arrow and shot it into the Warlock's shoulder. Natalie then had to deal with yet another Warlock, using not her sword but her light pendant, creating a lasso to tie down the Warlock, rendering him unable to move. Finally, the light lasso dropped the Warlock, who landed on the ground, and with a crack from his right arm was heard. "Oh, my arm!" the Warlock whined. Guess you had to hit rock bottom at some point," Natalie said. Before she could fight back, she spotted Zane charging toward her with a dagger. However, Natalie was quick to dodge his attempt with her sword. Glaring at the elder Warlock with annoyance before asking, "Would it kill you to give up?" This only made Zane angrier, and he snarled, Not until you are in the ground like the others, you filthy mundane. After being called this name for the 100th time, Natalie used the sword to push his dagger back and shouted, "I am not a mundane. I am the daughter of Grace, a forest warrior, and Thomas, a forest knight of Wildmoore. And you will not kill another soul, skin, or fur once me and my whole army are done with you." Zane, however, is unfazed by this and continues to fight against Natalie, using the crystal from his staff. On the other hand, he transports both himself and Natalie to the forest. Thomas saw this in horror and was about to run into the forest, but Forthwind stopped him and said, "Thomas, hop onto my back. We can find her better if we fly in the sky." Thomas nodded in agreement and hopped onto Forthwind's back before the dragon flapped his wings, creating gusts of wind powerful enough to knock down the upcoming warlocks charging towards Forthwind and Thomas. Forthwind lifted himself upwards until he was finally able to fly toward the direction of Forest Grove. Zane and Natalie found themselves at the tallest rocky ledge of the forest, known as Death Viper Cliff. This cliff is named after the now extinct snake species known as a death viper, where if bitten by the snake, its venom would kill someone instantly, and they would soon fall into the deep depths of the cliff. Natalie swung her sword towards Zane, but he was able to dodge it quickly. Finally, he used his crystal to pull the sword off of Natalie's grasp, and it fell to the side. Zane grabbed the back of Natalie's neck and forced her onto her knees. The cold blade of his dagger pressed against her throat. "Finally, after all these years, my wish of killing you is finally going to be granted," Zane snarled. But Natalie didn't look too scared by Zane's threat, and she spat back, "This isn't what Mirabelle wanted for you, Zane." Zane snapped, threatening with his dagger once more. "Do not say my mother's name, you naive little fool. It's your mother's fault that my mother is dead. It's because of her my mother is burned at the stake. My mother had nothing to do with it. Only my grandfather and the villagers did the execution, because they were afraid of magic. Not just the dark magic you have been practicing." Natalie tried to reason. Zane, for the first time in a long while, hesitated to dig his dagger into the girl's throat. However, he shook off that hesitation and shouted, "Lies! I'm not lying. My mother had nothing to do with your mother dying. She tried to stop the execution, but my grandfather was relentless and forbade her to see you as well. It's the truth. Nothing more, nothing less," Natalie replied. But Zane just shook his head and said, "Stop lying to me, you pathetic little..." His rant was interrupted when a beam of fire hit Zane's back, causing him to fall and drop his dagger. Natalie looked up to see that it was Thomas riding Forthwind. Relieved to see them both, she dragged her sword. She grabbed her sword and was about to run over to hop on Zane's back, but she felt Zane grab her ankle. With great force, Zane pulled her to the ground, causing her to drop her sword again. This time, Zane picked it up and pointed the sword towards Natalie's chest, with a maddening look in his eyes. Zane asked, "Any last words, mundane?" Natalie nodded and said, "Don't mess with the daughter of a forest knight and warrior." Suddenly, Natalie kicked Zane in the shin, causing the warlock to fall once more, this time dropping his staff containing the black crystal. As quickly as she could, Natalie grabbed the staff and ran to the edge of the cliff before stopping. Zane got to his feet and froze when he saw his staff in the girl's grasp. And she had a determined glare in her eyes. "Get that staff back to me, you little wench," Zane shouted. "This staff is..." Natalie spat back. "This staff is part of the reason you started to kill innocent people and animals. If your mom is around still and sees the kind of person you've become, she would be severely disappointed in you. My mother will be proud of me for avenging her death," Zane snidely said back. Natalie shook her head in disapproval and said, "Not like this. This isn't how you should honor your mother's memory. And she certainly didn't want you to use this stick to hurt people and animals again." With a powerful swing, Natalie smashed the black crystal on the side of the cliff, where it shattered into pieces. The pieces falling towards the 20 feet ground. Soon after the crystal was destroyed, Natalie then proceeded to knee the staff in half, before throwing it over the cliff as well, when Zane shouted in pure horror that his beloved staff was destroyed. "No!" He ran to the edge of the cliff to retrieve whatever was left of his staff, but it was too late. His staff was demolished and lying in the depths of Death Viper Cliff. Zane shouted. Thomas shouted, "It's over, Zane. It's time to turn you in for all your crimes against our world by being locked away in the kingdom's dungeon, where even magic can't get you out this time. And you will be bounded in chains for the rest of your all-natural life." Natalie nodded in agreement, knowing that this was the only humane way to punish Zane for all the crimes he had done to this world. But Zane glared at him in forthwith with pure hatred in his eyes before he finally said, "Never." Zane then turned to Natalie and charged straight at her. But she quickly dodged him and grabbed her sword, pointing it at him as soon as he turned back around to face her. Zane knew he was powerless now without his staff, because throughout the ordeal, it was only a source of his magic, particularly the black crystal that contained all the dark magic in the world. And it was something he's had since his mother died and joined the Dark Warlocks. But he also knew that being imprisoned is not how he will pay for his crimes. So he thought of a different tactic. The Warlock shouted, "Do it, mundane. Kill me. You kill me, you become evil like myself. Either way, you will never win." Natalie saw Zane wasn't going to give up so easily, but she knew what he was saying. But she knew what he was trying to make her do. So she lowered her sword and placed it back into the carrier on her back. Before she said, "That just shows how little you know me, Zane. I won't let the pain, anger, or greed dictate the kind of person I want to be. Which is why the only thing I'm doing is sparing your life. Because you are going to be put away for a long while." She then started to bolt away and made a jump to hop onto Forthwind's back. Not willing to go to the dungeon, Zane finally grabbed his dagger and charged towards Forthwind, so he could strike the guardian dragon dead. But before he could reach him, he felt something sharp dig into his spine, and his eyes looked as though it was about to bulge out of his head. Zane collapsed on the ground, and his breathing started to sound raggedy. To his shock, it was Maurice who stabbed him in the back. "Why did you do that, Maurice? The girl is the one who killed your family all those years ago." Zane said, trying to manipulate Maurice into his side. Maurice coldly looked at his now former ally and said, "She's not to blame for my wife and daughter's deaths. You are." Suddenly, Maurice kicked Zane until the warlock fell over the cliff, and finally, to his death, where he would never live to practice dark magic or hurt anyone else again. Natalie looked at Maurice in shock after she saw what he did. So she asked him, "We were about to put him away for good. Why did you do that?" Maurice replied, "He stabbed me in the back all those years ago. It would seem reasonable if I did the same to him." Okay, that was chapter 12. We were almost to the end. I hope you guys enjoy. Have a good day, and happy May 1st. Bye!